Welcome to our sharing on the second half of St. John's Gospel, and we're in chapter 18, beginning from verse 28. We are dealing with the last day in Jesus' life and the extraordinary drama that took place from morning until he died. I've already said to you that in John's Gospel, John does this scene by scene, and it's like as if each scene is really separate from the last one, because he wants you to contemplate it, not just rush on to the next thing. So the first scene is Jesus is accused, and this is verses 28 to 32, so I'll read them for you. They then led Jesus from the house of Caiaphas to the praetorium. It was now morning. They did not go into the praetorium themselves, or they would have been defiled and unable to eat the Passover. So Pilate came outside to them and said, "What charge do you bring against this man?" They replied, "If he were not a criminal, we would not be handing him over to you." Pilate said, "Take him yourselves and try him by your own law." The Jews answered, "We're not allowed to put a man to death." And this was to fulfill the words that Jesus had spoken, indicating the way he was going to die. Now, it's daybreak, and in hot countries, people begin their day very early, unlike in cold countries where we don't like beginning the day very early. Practically nobody except Jesus, and of course his Blessed Mother, understand that this is the day of redemption. This is Yom Yahweh. This is the Lord's day. But all the generations after this day, yes, they will acknowledge this is the Lord's day. And this is the day that Jesus is going to break all the fetters of sin and bring about the redemption of the human race. But the agents of darkness think it's their day, and they're working very, very hard to try and engineer the most terrible death they can think of for Jesus. But unknown to them, Psalm 118, which is celebrated at the time of the Passover and is actually prayed during the Passover meal, says, "This is the day the Lord has made, let us rejoice and be glad." So they take Jesus to the praetorium, and it is there that the court case is going to actually take place. Before we actually go into the court case, I want to look just for a moment at what the four Gospels deal with, really, and that is the betrayals of Jesus. Now, they don't use the word betrayal all the time. They use two words that actually mean betrayal, and that is that Jesus is handed over. So first of all, we've already dealt with the fact that Jesus was handed over to the Jewish authorities and the temple police by Judas. So Jesus was handed over by his friend first. And now the Sanhedrin hand him over to the public authorities represented by Pilate. When you go back to Luke's Gospel, Pilate doesn't want to deal with this man. It's too much for him. And so he hands him over to King Herod. King Herod can't handle him at all, and he hands him over to the secular authority represented by Pilate again. Then we have Pilate handing him over to the torturers for no reason whatsoever. And then we have him handing Jesus over to death. This is betrayal upon betrayal upon betrayal upon betrayal. If any of them realized who Jesus really was, they could not have done it. It would be absolutely impossible. It's very clear from the text that nobody wants to deal with Jesus. They're afraid of him. They'll talk about him behind his back, but when Jesus is actually present, they're afraid of him. And I'm going to show you that with regard to Pilate as well. But they do want somebody to deal with him. And this is why they keep handing him over. As we've already said in John 15:25, they hated him without cause. Now, one of the big issues is the charge against Jesus. And as I've just read for you, the reaction of the Sanhedrin to Pilate was, well, if he wasn't a criminal, we wouldn't be handing him over. Now, as far as Pilate is concerned, a criminal is somebody who has broken the civil law, or he's a revolutionary and he's fighting against the authority of Caesar, represented by Pilate. That he can understand. But what on earth is wrong with this mild human being that's standing in front of him, he will never be able to work out at all. We know that Jesus is being killed because he claims to be the Son of God. But that's a religious matter, and it won't hold up in a civil court. And because it won't hold up in a civil court, we're going to see the first sin of the Sanhedrin. Well, they've committed many sins up to now, but this particular one, on this particular day, they change the charge. They make the charge fit the court it's actually in. Now, Pilate is not so stupid as not be able to see through that. But he finds it extremely difficult to handle this crowd who are much cleverer than he is. So they accuse Jesus of being a revolutionary, and we're going to see what Pilate does with that after a while. In other words, that he's a king trying to oppose Caesar. But you need to understand that that is exactly what the Sanhedrin and the entire Jewish nation wanted their Jewish Messiah to do. They wanted him to stand up against Rome and to conquer Rome and to liberate Israel. They wanted political salvation. Jesus absolutely refused to go down the political route, and they're going to take terrible revenge on him for that. So the Jewish punishment for blasphemy was stoning. And we saw several attempts in the gospel that they tried to stone Jesus. For example, in chapter 7, chapter 8, chapter 10, and chapter 11. Well, that's frequent enough for us to realize that the real charge is blasphemy. It's not anything to do with politics. Pilate, though, has to find out if behind this religious charge there is some kind of reality. In other words, is there any hidden politics involved? He has to investigate that. Why wouldn't they stone Jesus? When we come into the Acts of the Apostles in chapter 7, you'll find that they stoned Stephen and they didn't even hesitate. But they won't stone Jesus because it's not just his death they're looking for. They want to disgrace him in the eyes of the people because so many of the people believe in Jesus. And this is what we heard the Sanhedrin saying back in chapter 11. Everybody's believing in him. And if they continue this, we're going to lose all our authority. We're going to lose all our religion if he takes over. So we have to get rid of him. So they have to disgrace Jesus in the eyes of the people. And the way to do that is to bring on the curse of Deuteronomy 21:23. Deuteronomy 21:23 says, "Cursed be any man who hangs on a tree." That means that that man is cursed before God. So if this nation sees Jesus hanging on a tree, they cannot accept him as Messiah or Son of God or anything else, because we've proved that he's a curse. It's very, very interesting. So when you go to Galatians chapter 3 and verse 13, you have Paul, who was a rabid Pharisee initially, to the point of persecuting the church. When he came round to really understand the mystery of Jesus, he said, "Christ redeemed us from the curse of the law by becoming a curse for us. As it is written in Deuteronomy, cursed is everyone who is hung upon a tree. But Jesus redeemed us so that the blessing that was given to Abraham would be passed on to the Gentiles." So even somebody like Paul, who had been an enemy of Christ and Christianity initially, came around to understand that by accepting to be crucified, Jesus was going to redeem the whole law. and that the curse of the law would actually be removed. At the time of Jesus' death, the Roman authorities had taken away from the Jewish authorities the ability to execute somebody. Even though they stoned Stephen, it was actually unlawful and illegal. They were not allowed to kill a man. And they will admit that openly to Pilate, as we've just read. So the Roman authorities have to do the dirty work for the Jewish people. But because it was the Sanhedrin who actually engineered the whole thing, they, in Jesus' eyes, are much more responsible for his death than Pilate, who doesn't really understand what's going on. So let's come to the next scene in this incredible drama in John's Gospel, and this is verses 33 to 38. So the first issue was, what is the accusation? The second issue is going to be, is this man a king or not? Okay, so from verse 33, so Pilate went back into the praetorium and called Jesus to him. Are you the king of the Jews? He said. Jesus replied, do you ask this of your own accord, or have others spoken to you about me? Pilate answered, am I a Jew? It's your own people and the chief priests who've handed you over to me. What have you done? And Jesus replied, mine is not a kingdom of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my men would have fought to prevent me from being surrendered to the Jews. But my kingdom is not of this world. So you are a king then? Pilate said. 'Tis you who say it, says Jesus. Yes, I am a king. I was born for this. I came into the world for this, to bear witness to the truth. And all who are on the side of truth will listen to my voice. Jesus has gone way beyond anything that Pilate can deal with. Pilate doesn't have a clue what Jesus is saying. So out there in the front stage, where Pilate went out to meet the Jewish leaders, they have this raucous noise and accusations against Jesus. Now Pilate goes backstage to meet this very silent, humble, gentle human being that's being accused. And it's two different worlds. And Pilate has his jails full of revolutionaries. He has his jails full of agitators. He takes one look at Jesus and says, you a king? From a worldly point of view, this is as far distant from reality as Pilate could actually imagine. Because it's perfectly obvious he's looking at a non-political person and someone who couldn't even imagine being an agitator or a rebellious person. So Pilate knew that the charge against Jesus was false. We find that stated very clearly in Mark 15:11, where Mark says that Pilate knew it was out of jealousy that they arrested Jesus. Please don't think that Pilate didn't know Jesus. Pilate's wife was one of Jesus' disciples. Everybody in Israel knew Jesus. When Jesus told the Sanhedrin, everybody here has heard me, everybody in Israel had heard him. Everybody. Israel was dominated by the Romans at the time, and the Roman soldiers were all over Israel. And there was no way that the Jewish people could have a meeting in any synagogue or in any town anywhere without the Roman soldiers being around. And you can see that in the Synoptic Gospels, where Jesus talks to the Roman soldiers and he heals some of them, and he even gets some of them actually believing in him. So they were everywhere. There's no way Pilate doesn't know who this man is. And Pilate knows that whatever it is that the Sanhedrin want to kill him, that it's outside of his ability to actually deal with it. So he said, so you are a king. So this may be politics after all. Everything's fine until Jesus actually speaks. The moment Jesus speaks, he turns the whole thing on its head, because Jesus is the Saviour of the world, and he's the Saviour of Pilate. He's the Saviour of the Sanhedrin. He's the Saviour of the people of Israel. He's the Saviour of all the world. So his approach to human beings is completely different to everybody else's. And so he said to Pilate, do you want to know the truth yourself? Or is this just, a job that was given to you? If you really want to know the truth, yes, I'll show you. I'll tell you. And so what you have here, and John does this in a very lovely way, in his usual wonderful way, that Pilate is standing facing the light, but Pilate is utterly blind in his paganism. He's utterly dark in his sinful life, and he cannot see the light. All he knows is that whatever is in front of him is completely extraordinary. That's all. He doesn't know anything else. But as far as John is concerned, this is the moment when Pilate must accept or reject the light that is standing in front of him. Everybody does, because every single person who has ever lived will have to stand before Jesus of Nazareth, because he will be their final judge. And so this is the moment for Pilate. And so Pilate has to give a response. And unfortunately, his response is very cynical. Am I a Jew? You see, Pilate was famous for one thing, and that is his hatred of the Jews. He was very unjust to them, and he interfered with their sacred laws. He did so many things that even Rome disapproved of Pilate's reaction to the Jews. And so, am I a Jew? It brings out this hatred. So what Jesus is hearing is that this man actually hates Jesus' own people, the very people that Jesus has decided to give his life for. And you can see how complicated the whole thing is. It is really incredible. And so Pilate demands to know what he has done. Now, what he has done means in terms of politics. Now, he knows, because the Roman soldiers are all over the place. If Jesus had done anything political, they would have picked him up before now. And so Jesus' response is a truly Johannine response. That Jesus says, yes, I am a king, but you would have no way of understanding what my kingdom is, where it is, how it operates. It neither gets its power, authority, nor influence from the world you live in. It's of a completely different dimension. If I belonged to a kingdom in your dimension, that is in the cosmos, where human politics goes on, he said, if I had a kingdom there, my men would have fought to defend me. But in the kingdom that Jesus belongs to, it would be legions of angels that would be defending him. That's what the synoptics tell us. It would be legions of angels. Now, as far as Pilate is concerned, Jesus is speaking a foreign language, totally speaking a foreign language. And so Pilate is not one of Jesus' disciples. He is not going to listen to the voice of the shepherd. He is not going to take this message. He doesn't want to live a life of love and self-giving. This man is totally selfish, living an immoral life and a true pagan. And so the realm of the spirit and the realm of the cosmos are meeting head on in this meeting between Pilate and Jesus. And you can see there's no language in common. There's no understanding. There is nothing. Pilate is completely lost. All he knows is that there's no political case against this man. That's the only thing he knows. And he's going to walk out from this, and the first thing he will declare to the raucous, noisy crowd out in the front of this terrible drama is that there is no case against this man. The world powers cannot find sin in this man. None of them will do that. When I look at this dialogue between Jesus and Pilate, I say, poor Pilate, he doesn't have a chance. He doesn't have any language, understanding, philosophy, theology, religion, anything to deal with this very simple, utterly profound person that is in front of him. But I want to remind you of something that Jesus himself said in John chapter 7, verse 7. The world cannot hate you, he said, but it does hate me because I give evidence that its ways are evil. Now we're going to see in the dialogue that's going to go on between Jesus and Pilate and all the drama that comes out of it, we're going to see that Pilate represents this sinful world, has no idea what holiness or beauty or love or anything else is like. And it's really, really sad. But Jesus will never give up on him, because Pilate is not one of my sheep, but he's one of those other sheep that must be saved. He wants everyone saved. Thank you for listening. Slán agus Banach Day live. Goodbye. God bless you.
Maybe getting.
You can't always.
This is the death.
Remarkably
Turn back towards God. Rise up.